Hi Sudheer. So today we are going to have some simple and fun questions around Tabreed. Let's know Tabreed India a little bit better. So how would you introduce Tabreed India in the simplest way possible?
I would actually say Tabreed India is the new cool kid on the block, where, of course, we are in the cooling business, and essentially we design, build, and operate cooling systems to provide cooling as a service, either at a building level or at much larger scale, what we call district cooling. And we are the subsidiary of Tabreed UAE, and in India, it's a joint venture with IFC, which is part of the World Bank.
Awesome.
Broadly.
Awesome. So if somebody does not know what district cooling is, so how would you make them understand?
Whatever cooling is done by people within their buildings individually, vis-a-vis that, essentially district cooling is aggregating demand either for a building or a set of buildings or much larger scale, and by aggregating and then doing it centrally, doing it in a far more energy efficient, sustainable and cost effective manner. And that's what district cooling is all about. Exactly.
Great. So how would you describe Tabreed India's role in India's smart city projects?
Yeah, I think beyond just smart cities, what I would say is that currently what we are seeing, not just in India but also globally, the global south as well, is because of extreme climate events and increasing heat stress across the world, the need for cooling is becoming more and more and more. For a country like India, already right now, close to 20% of the peak energy demand is going for cooling, whether for people, for buildings, or for data centers because of the extent of data consumption. And with cooling already being a significant part of the energy demand, it's almost like over the last 7 years, all the capacity that India has added in renewable energy through solar and wind, the cooling demand has outstripped that, right? So, and this is going to continue further, where basically for the next 20 years, we are going to see that 45% of India's peak energy demand is going to be going towards cooling. So it's almost more of I would actually like to rephrase the energy transition to be more of a cooling transition than the energy transition, because the energy transition focuses only on supply, where here we are talking of what can you do on the demand side to make demand more efficient so that the supply isn't as much required. Now within the smart city side and the urban side, essentially what district cooling can do is it can accelerate. A big part of the smart cities focus from what we saw was more on technology interventions and automation and so on and so forth. But for the hard infrastructure, what is required is a lot more circular use of resources, whether it is waste, whether it is water, sewage, and of course meeting electricity and so on and so forth. So district cooling can actually help the smart cities mission in terms of accelerating the adoption of more circular systems to make the city footprint far more sustainable, decarbonized, of course, and more livable from a resource utility standpoint.
So what's the sustainability impact of Tabreed India's projects?
It's at multiple levels. Essentially, like I said, because for most centrally air-conditioned buildings, the biggest part of the energy demand is for air conditioning. And by doing it through more efficient ways in the way you design the cooling systems and also meet it on an ongoing long-term basis, you can cut the energy demand by half. And currently for India right now, still a big part of the energy mix is still on fossil fuels and coal and so on and so forth. So I think that basically is the straight obvious benefit, where basically through lower energy consumption, you are being more sustainable and you help buildings decarbonize and also become net zero in a much more accelerated way compared to what is happening right now. That's one. The second, often not spoken about much aspect is also around refrigerants. Because right now, I think there's very little focus, while there is a lot of focus on trying to move away from a certain type of refrigerant to another type, which has less global warming potential and less ozone depleting potential, there isn't as much focus on the manner in which refrigerants are handled, used, and even disposed of at the end of the useful life, including on normal window units and so on and so forth. Nobody really keeps track of what happens to the refrigerant that is left. Nobody keeps track of the refrigerant leaks that happen within, which people call as a gas leak, for example, in their indoor units and so on and so forth. And that has significantly higher global warming potential compared to just energy itself, right? So essentially from an organized player like Tabreed, who builds, owns and operates the cooling infrastructure with zero tolerance towards leaks and so on and so forth, there is also a reduction and avoidance of harmful refrigerants going into the environment, because every unit is recovered, reused, or handled in a way that is not environmentally destructive. So I think these are the two broad aspects. And the third aspect is basically because district cooling essentially, and what Tabreed does to cooling as a service as well, essentially is about aggregating cooling demand for a set of buildings, meeting it centrally through one plant, and then making sure that what people want ultimately is thermal comfort.
Since we have been doing so many cool things and we have partnered with a lot of companies and organizations, is there any particular client success story that you are really proud of and would you like to share?
Yeah, actually, I would probably can talk about two specific instances. One is our existing partnership we have with Tata Realty, where it was a landmark transaction that we executed with them on multiple fronts. It was India's first 30-year cooling as a service transaction, where we essentially agreed to own, operate, and provide long-term cooling for Tata Realty. And of course, Tata is a well-known, established brand name in the country. And we're extremely happy that someone like Tata would willing to trust us to work and partner with us on a 30-year long-term concession, which is quite rare, especially in the overall commercial real estate industry, where most contracts that they sign for facility management and managing the buildings and so on are just 2 to 3 years at the most. So here they were willing to commit pretty much to a marriage of sorts for 30 years for us to partner with them. And we've taken over the existing infrastructure, of course, expanded it, and we are providing and we're working together with them closely to implement a whole lot of measures to improve already what was a well-designed system to make it even more energy efficient, increase the extent of automation, and also ensure that ultimately thermal comfort, both for cooling and now as we go along, even in the winter months for heating as well, can be provided for the tenants in the space going forward. So that's something which I think we are extremely proud of. We are happy that, like I said, we have someone like Tata Realty to be working with, and we are hoping to, of course, look at more of such cases. Another one which, while I would call as a success story, but not necessarily something that's materialized on the ground as yet, is in fact for the new capital of Andhra Pradesh, which is being now finally coming to life right now, right? I mean, Amravati, where what is interesting was basically seeing the vision of the chief minister back then of trying to make the city truly sustainable, clean, energy efficient, and probably amongst the most advanced cities in the world. And his willingness and the willingness of the entire Amravati government team to incorporate something like district cooling, changing the master plan, running a tender, and then trying to achieve sustainability benefits from an overall urban planning standpoint. And there again, we at least were able to demonstrate that this makes sense, participate in the tender. We awarded the project in 2019. Of course, the city the construction kind of went on hold, and now things are taking off. And we'd hope to basically demonstrate that as the first PPP, truly PPP 30-year concession within district cooling in India, there could be a lot more replicable opportunities across all states and cities and so on in the country.
Awesome. So let's get a little bit technical now. So what kind of technological innovation has Tabreed India brought in the district cooling or cooling segment?
Sure. And thanks for that. That's a great question, Shwanti. So I think, we've been doing a number of things actually in terms of trying to accelerate the innovation in the R&D ecosystem per se in India. Right? Beyond district cooling in itself as a solution, already incorporating, because ultimately we are not a technology manufacturer, nor are we an OEM, right? We basically, you can say we are like a platform of sorts, where depending upon each project characteristics, we as a global player already working with a variety of cooling technology and solutions across the entire spectrum. We already know what works and what doesn't work from a practical market context and so on. So just by the sheer nature of district cooling being adopted itself, there are a number of technology innovations and interventions that kind of come about within the base offering, even before going into new R&D and so on, right? And some examples are essentially around thermal energy storage, right? For example, we don't see thermal energy storage being applied anywhere, and wherever it was adopted in India, they've generally not worked well because of the way it's been designed or the way it's been installed and so on and so forth. As a company, most of our plants have thermal energy storage, and the benefit of thermal energy storage is basically because cooling, the demand is not constant. You have more in offices and buildings, for example, in the daytime, residential in the nighttime, and so on. So, but you're still installing the same capacity to meet the demand. So, through thermal energy storage, what happens is basically during off-peak times, you produce cooling, store it. There are again a variety of technologies out there, but the most basic one is storing it as chilled water, and then using it when the demand arises to essentially shape the peak load. So that's a very simple intervention from what we've been doing for many years already and implementing that. A whole lot of automation and a whole lot of AI solutions just to make sure that plants can operate completely seamless 24/7 with no interruption, with a high degree of resilience and of course high degree of operational efficiency as well. And I can go into specifics there, but in the Indian context, what we've been excited about the last 2 years is our partnership again with IFC. IFC runs a program called as TechEmerge, which is essentially a matchmaking program of sorts, trying to look at all the leading innovations happening in the cooling and the R&D space globally, whether it's in startups or large corporations and so on, and looking at practical, tangible ways to accelerate adoption of that in the market. And so we set up something called as a Cooling Innovation Lab 2 years ago in India, and we decided to focus on 4 or 5 broad areas where we saw the maximum possibility for new technologies and innovation to get into the market, because generally most buildings still follow the typical vapor compression cycle. So there's been very minimal incremental technology interventions innovations per se in the cooling sector. There could be a lot going for, but at least so far it's been very minimal. So when we set up the program 2 years ago and thought, where can we look at more innovative options to be brought to market, we identified 4 or 5 broad areas. One was we saw there's a lot of progress happening on heat exchange, right? Heat exchange using nanotechnologies and so on and so forth. So we saw there were a number of startups both here as well as internationally. So we thought by looking at what solutions are fit for purpose in India, we could try accelerate adoption of that in specific pilot projects in the country. Second was around heat rejection as well, and using water bodies and other ways to also look at heat rejection. Storage, like I said, beyond just conventional thermal storage, energy storage, technologies like phase change materials and so on, where there are a number of Indian startups as well who are doing extremely good work to use PCMs, phase change material, as a means to store thermal energy to provide cooling. So we thought storage could be another area. The other was around renewable integration. How can we combine solar with cooling to make sure that, of course, then you further decarbonize the grid, remove reliance on the grid, and use a combination of green energy coupled with efficient cooling. Automation and AI, like I said. So these are the 4 or 5, and mechanical interventions through drives and so on and so forth. So we identified that these are the 5-6 broad pillars of intervention. Through that, over the last 2 years, we've done about 18 pilot projects with a number of hotels, the Chalet Group, IHCL, and so on and so forth. We've also basically partnered with 2 universities, Plaksha University in Mohali and IIT Jammu, to set up cooling test beds to test out some of these technologies and see what their potential is. So for example, in Plaksha, we set up a pilot plant to have phase change material to provide cooling to essentially see if the hostel block can be basically met through a standalone system using thermal storage combined with solar energy to make it completely decarbonized and net zero. And that's shaping up quite well. So I think so working with universities on some of these innovations and some progressive customers who were willing to essentially adopt some of these new solutions is what we've done. And the way it was structured was basically, on one hand, we mapped out a variety of providers who are there offering these solutions, from startups to larger corporations and so on, to see the technology readiness level for a market like India. And then once we identified that, and we had global calls for proposals from time to time for anybody to apply for this program. And depending on the number of people who applied, we shortlisted what could be scalable in the Indian context. So that was trying to map out technology with, of course, IFC's support and so on, right? On the other hand, we reached out to a number of developers, Big Basket, for example, as well, and so on, and to see what their cooling needs are and tell them that, hey, these solutions, and the criteria was, can this technology improve efficiency by X percentage, reduce emissions, right, and be innovative, which is not there right now. And basis those criteria, we reached out to clients in the market, customers, potential large corporates in the country, to see if they were interested in implementing something of this kind. And whoever was interested, through a grant program as well, with them also taking some risk, essentially looking at piloting these, and basis the pilot results, then of course offering an opportunity for the startups to scale, buildings to decarbonize, and accelerate and catalyze the overall market ecosystem for more sustainable cooling right now. And that's had great success, like I said, because also with the partnership that we have with IIT Jammu and the number of cooling test beds that have been set up out there and so on. So those are trying to bring, I would say, market-ready technologies and solutions faster to the market by understanding what the barriers for adoption are and trying to resolve those barriers and ensuring that they can actually be implemented and achieve tangible results, so that as a result of that in itself, the innovation ecosystem grows. The breed does it or not doesn't matter. I think more about trying to bring about a lot more innovation in cooling. So that's some good examples of what we've been doing on R&D innovation, and we hope to do more of that and In our projects in general, where we of course own our plants, design and build them, in any case, since our business as a cooling utility, unlike a real estate developer, for example, who has to look at a number of things and may not necessarily be abreast with all the technologies out there, since this is our core business and we have global presence, we ensure that from time to time with our innovation team in the UAE as well, and of course one of our shareholder, NG, also has active incubation labs across many parts of the world, Singapore, in Paris and so on. We keep tab on what's happening on cooling innovation, solutions and on opportunities, and as each new project comes about, ensure that we take the risk of incorporating that at all points of time to ensure that ultimately we push the boundaries in terms of energy efficiency, sustainability, cost effectiveness in the way we offer solutions to the market and so on. And ultimately, I think, we try combine aspects around sustainability and cost together in what we offer on a long-term basis, not just one day, 1 month, or sell a product, but we offer a service, right? So
that's really impressive, and that's interesting actually. Now, I would like to ask you a very fun question. So you have been working and leading a team for Tabreed India.
Yeah.
What do you love about working with Tabreed India personally?
many things. I love the fact that we are in some sense like a startup of sorts with the backing of extremely well-established large a corporate like Tabreed in the UAE, right? So it gives the flexibility and the fun of having a bit of a startup environment, yet the backing and the comfort and the support of Tabreed globally, right? And shareholders like IFC as well. So that's one of the best parts. So it offers the opportunity for each individual in the team to truly be able to think and feel like as if it's their own business. And I think that's the philosophy that I try to follow, where basically there is a sense of purpose that and there are very few aspects where, at least personally, I see beyond renewable energy that can combine one's purpose to do something in sustainability, combined with a corporate and making real world impact, right? And as long as the team is aligned, that there is some aspect of personal purpose alignment with the corporate purpose alignment, and there is that enabling environment to basically do that, it's great. And that's something that Tabreed India offers, where it really gives a sense of being in a stable, secure, well-paying global corporate, a lot of scope for innovation and R&D, a lot of flexibility, not of course like a complete startup, but at the same time, many aspects of flexibility that one would probably crave within a large corporation, that you would be finding it harder and harder to get. And the team is a fun, cool team, and right. So it's like, and that way it just helps to really be able to work in a formal yet informal way towards trying to provide actual effective solutions to what the market needs.
Amazing, amazing.